I mentioned, I had traveled to Egypt, first traveled to Egypt 26 years ago. So when you think about Egypt, or when you talk about Egypt, people automatically think of the pyramids. They think of tombs. They think of monuments. Tombs and the monuments in the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Queens, the Valley of the Nobles. In this region of Kemet, on the west bank of the Nile River, in the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Dead, archaeologists have found dozens of tombs. And these discovery of these tombs have increased their knowledge of this most ancient civilization. But Egyptologists and archaeologists also know that there are hundreds and maybe even thousands of tombs which have yet to be discovered. And that each new discovery will enhance and transform their knowledge of ancient Egypt. And so as they discovered a new tomb, they've learned that the further they go back into ancient Egypt, the blacker it becomes. Amen. And so they know that if the truth is ever revealed about Kemet, if we're to ever be made known, then they will lose their control on the minds of African people. And they would ultimately lose their control of the world. So therefore, it is their job to control and manipulate the image and the information which comes out of Kemet, the Nile Valley, and Africa. That is their job. So, I get tired of folk calling me, Tony, I saw this program on National Geographic, and they said the Egyptians were white. Well, what do you expect from National Geographic? They're doing their job. And it's your job not to believe that. So they do their job, you must do your job. And you can't expect a liar to all of a sudden start telling you the truth. It's not their nature. And so, they have to manipulate the information that comes out of Kemet in order for them to hold on to their power. I've traveled to Egypt 39 times over the last 26 years. And as my experiences in traveling to Kemet grew, I matured. The first dozen times I went to Egypt, I was thinking that this is a spiritual place and we're going to come in contact with the spirit of our ancestors, and I was hoping that I would stumble into the tomb of Imhotep, discover some great secrets that I could bring back to my people, but that ain't happening. I've accepted the fact that ain't going to happen. So, but it's only been recently that I've begun to consider something about Kemet that I've never considered before. And so follow this concept. Each tomb in Kemet is covered with metal netcher. Every square inch, metal netcher, or sacred carvings. And each sarcophagus, or neb ankh, sarcophagus is a Greek word. Now, sarcophagus means flesh eater. So it was the coffin, if you will, where the flesh was consumed. The people of Kemet referred to that vessel as neb ankh. Neb ankh means Lord of life. So it was the vessel in which your body was transformed and you became a Lord of life. Totally different concept. And each body buried in the neb ankh was buried with papyrus scrolls, which had information written on them. These writings in the tombs, the Pyramid of Unas, and all of these sarcophagi or neb ankhs that were discovered, these writings were known to the people of Kemet as Pet Em Heru, or the chapters of coming forth into day. Or I like to refer to them as instructions on how to be born again. The Arab and European grave robbers who discovered these tombs referred to these writings as the Book of the Dead. Why? Because these writings were always found on dead people, so they called them the Book of the Dead. But they were, in fact, words that the deceased were to speak to Impu, to Ma'at, to Heru, and to Asar on the day of their judgment so that their souls would be reborn in a new body, in the new life that they would relive when they were reborn in Kemet. These were, if you follow the concept, so to the Arab and Europeans, these ancient Africans had a preoccupation with death. In other words, you watch National Geographic specials on the mummies, they say that these people lived to die. From the moment a person became king, they started working on his tomb. They had a preoccupation with death. But to an African who's attained knowledge of self and looks at the tombs and the book of the dead with new understanding, they begin to understand what they didn't know that they didn't know. And that is that the so-called book of the dead was just the epilogue of a book of even greater significance, a book that we've never been told existed. I refer to it as the Kemetic book of the living. See, if they had this book of the dead, they had to have a book on how to live. But they don't talk about that. So, when you begin to consider these possibilities, the solutions become Sesame Street simple. I mean, they just make so much sense all of a sudden. The people of Kemet understood that the soul was eternal. And so they left instructions for that soul to overcome the traumatic ejection from the body, which we call death, so that that soul could find its way through the 12 gates of the underworld into the hall of judgment, be weighed on the scale of Ma'at so that it could stand before a Sar and be judged Ma'at Keru, chew a voice. This is their way of safeguarding that that soul would be born again. And so if that soul found its way through that perilous journey, it would be reborn in Kemet and experience a new life in a new body. And so that soul, with these instructions, would be able to retain information from its previous life so that it would live an extraordinary life in the next. Imhotep, Queen Tai, Ramesses the Great, all lived extraordinary lives. And the people of Kemet referred to this phenomena as the Rememesu, the repetition of the birth. So with this insight, one realizes that the people of Kemet actually had a preoccupation with life, not death, and that they had a book of life, instructions on how to live so that they can ensure that they would be born again and again and again. And with each rebirth, they would be able to live the highest quality of life that a human being could live. Thus, they would be capable of creating heaven on earth. And this is exactly what the people of Kemet did. It is exactly what our ancestors did thousands of years ago. So, just consider these facts. 6,000 years ago, Africans in the Nile Valley created the longest sustained government and civilization in human history. They created 6,000 years ago an embalming process which cannot be duplicated. They created 6,000 years ago pyramids which modern technology cannot replicate. 6,000 years ago, our ancestors created systems of science, mathematics, philosophy, engineering, astronomy, medicine, architecture, and chemistry, which have influenced humanity for thousands of years. So they knew something that modern man, with all of his technology, doesn't know that they don't even not know. And so, The greatest gift